Ha, we here. Big fish shit. Ooh, ooh. Welcome to the podcast. Hope y'all enjoy it. Hope y'all learn something. And most importantly, we hope y'all elevate. Let's get it.
Big fish, hit a big lick. We gon' bet it right back and hit a big flip. We been up for a minute and we still lit. Get them cats gon' talk, but we don't feel shit. We just giving y'all gems y'all can live with. Elevate your mind, never mind all the bullshit. Finna talk about stocks, we ain't worry about ops. First get the bread up, then buy back the whole block. 10 toes down, we ain't never gonna stop. I'm a man of my word, I ain't never gonna flop. If I said it, then I meant it. Real ones gon' respect it, and it's still OG. It's in me, I represent it.
Ooh, ooh. It is the end of December, and I have a very amazing special guest. Very excited for her to share her story. Very excited for me personally to learn a lot from, as well as everybody else. We have a lot of these conversations all the time, and I always take a lot away from them. So it is my privilege, my honor to welcome my friend first, Shagha, also Dr. DeNoble. So just want to welcome you. I appreciate you being here. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
And so today we're going to cover a range of topics, but one that I think that you are extremely qualified to talk about is the balance between being a professional, being a doctor, and also being a mother, working within your community as the teacher, the guide, the mentor for your kids as well as the community kids. And then maybe we'll touch a little bit on your overall faith, your perspective on life, and how everything comes together. So first, tell us a little bit about, how you grew up, where you grew up, what kind of is your background, what would you describe as your culture?
Great, yeah. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I come from an Iranian family. We actually moved to the States when I was 5 from Iran. My brother, my parents, and I. I grew up in a Bahai household. So my religious faith is Bahai Faith. And I think that has shaped me as I grew up, and it continues to influence my life greatly. And again, these views that I'm going to voice today are my own. I'm not a professional or a professional speaker of the Bahai Faith or anything like that. But it has definitely shaped who I am and how I think, and the principles that I try to live by.
And the principles you've introduced me to, just obviously in our conversation between you, me, your husband, just learning. And me being kind of in an exploration stage with when it comes to religion and faith, I'm always trying to learn different things from different cultures. So the Baha'i faith is one that is, if I'm not mistaken, a newer faith, and one that I identify a lot with the principles, the values, the morals, the overall culture and code of the religion or the faith. And would you differentiate between religion and faith, or what's the proper way to say?
Great question. I mean, it's called the Baha'i Faith. We see all religions, including the Baha'i Faith, as really part of one religion. So the unity of religion, meaning the concept that there's really only one religion of God, is really deep in the Baha'i Faith. And what that means is that all the different religions we see today, practiced in the world, we see as part of like chapters of a different book. So they all build on each other. They all have come at different times. But they're all part of the religion of God, the greater book of the religion of God. And we believe the Baha'i Faith is just the most recent chapter in that book.
Wow.
That makes
and
sense.
That's, it's funny. You're bringing up different things in my head of past conversations that we've had. And that probably is one that stood out to me the most, that just because it makes sense. Different faiths or religions come into play at different times, and different solutions are required at different times. So therefore it makes sense to say like, oh, well, this religion may be a little bit different than that religion, just based on it was serving a different purpose at that particular time. So that's something that always stood out to me, and just the acceptance of all religions and the understanding that, hey, this is all the same thing. This is all under the same God.
Yes.
We're just able to tap into different things at different moments and kind of pull what we need at that time. Is that, am I?
Absolutely. You know, I think, and as a physician myself, I love the quote from the Baha'i writings that describes these prophets of God, these teachers that have brought the different religions as divine physicians. And there's a quote that describes that these prophets of God are the divine physicians, and they have their pulse, their finger on the pulse of mankind. So they know at a given time what are the main ills of society and of humanity, and then they can prescribe the remedy that applies to those problems for humanity at that time. You know, we're not, humanity is constantly changing, evolving, growing, progressing. And so the specific remedies for 3,000 years ago may not apply to today. And the ones for today might not apply 4,000 years from now. So that does need to evolve. Or I like to, when I talk to kids, I talk about the iPhone because they relate to that. I'm like, all right, there's one iPhone, there's one religion, and there's iPhone 1, 2, 3, what are we on now? 14? I don't know.
What
and it's upgraded, 14, right? It's upgraded because our needs are different, and then our technology changes, and we're able to do different things. And you could use an iPhone 9 or 10, but it might be a little bit not as applying to what you need right now. You know.
So everything that you're saying is bringing about context. Like sometimes with religion, when it's taught to us, either we're not asking the right questions, or maybe it's not taught to us with a certain amount of context that you just described. So sometimes we'll compare one religion that may have come at a time where, let's say, there was a lot of promiscuous behavior.
Right.
So it may say like, hey, we need to address this issue, cover up a little bit more.
Yes.
And, you know, just to get that respect back.
Yes.
But then to apply it to a different time where maybe things are okay, like, hey, you know, there's a lot of control, you know, going on. You know, I want to be a little bit more free. You know, people may think that. So it's kind of unfair to compare a religion across the board to one particular time without giving that context and that understanding. Because if you gave me an iPhone 1 right now, I'd say it's the worst phone in the world. However, when it came out, it was the best thing.
Yes.
You know, it was groundbreaking. So that's kind of how I see the Baha'i faith, and how it's a little bit different in the teachings compared to a lot of the other religions.
Absolutely right. So some things might seem contradictory, but you cannot take things out of context. Absolutely right. Same as an individual human being. As you're developing, you're a kid, you know, you're a toddler, and then you're like a preteen, and then you're a teenager, and then you're entering a maturity and adulthood. And you can't view the person today and look at what they did when they were 9 or 10. You know, there's a development, there's a progress, there's an evolution and a maturity. And sometimes you make mistakes, and humanity is no different. Collectively, you know, if you think of it in those terms, it all comes together and makes sense. Things that seem contradictory no longer seem contradictory. Like a 3-year-old is a little bit of a narcissist, right?
I would agree.
They're a little narcissistic.
Or a 30-year-old.
Yeah, or a 30-year-old. But if you don't develop out of that, it's okay to think that way when you're 3. But then you're growing and you're developing. And at 25, you're going to think differently.
Right.
And you're going to have developed different qualities, you know.
Now, is that something that, because I agree with everything you just said, and I think the word that comes to mind is a grace, you know, extending grace. And something that my brother has always called me out on is, he's like, you can't hold me accountable for who I was when I was 10 or 15. Right. You got to give people a chance to grow. Yeah. And when he told me that, it kind of made me reflect on myself and say, like, I'm not the same person that I was then. So I need to also be able to extend that grace. Was this your particular, like, family, how you were raised in your family, or is this more so how most Baha'i faith members see the world as well? Yeah,
these are all teachings that we get from the Baha'i faith. These are how the Baha'i faith has described religion and humanity and progress. And so I did grow up in most Baha'i families, same. They grow up with these concepts and ideas. And I did grow up in a Baha'i family where about 3 generations on both sides come from the Baha'i faith. Prior to that, you know, from Iran, and it was a Muslim background. But yeah.
That's interesting. And just me learning about it, I expect a lot more Americans to learn about the Baha'i faith, because I think it's, like you said, it's a newer technology, comparing it to the iPhone that we need right now. Right. That a lot of us seem lost, you know, without the right guidance. And this seems, that's too old, or that's too new, or this too progressive, or this too conservative. So I think the Baha'i faith offers an excellent balance. So I'm excited to learn more. And now we'll get into a little bit more of how your upbringing shaped you to become who you are today. First, we'll start on the professional side.
Sure.
I've had the pleasure of seeing you compete with your brother. No, it was compete with your friend, with your brother's friend on the basketball court, on the old camcorder videos.
Yep.
And I saw you, I saw tenacity, I saw discipline, I saw everything that you would want your kids to have. To develop, certain things that we've talked about. It's hard. You want to give your kids a good life, but at the same time, you want them to also learn discipline, determination, being a go-getter, working hard. I saw all that demonstrated in that video. So I'm just interested from the professional side, how your Bahai faith, your family upbringing helped prepare you to excel on the professional side.
Yeah, so I'm a doctor, and I'm specifically an OBGYN, and I think that was always there as a young child because women's issues was always important to me. And a lot of that I think came from my religious upbringing, because in the Bahai faith, we are taught that women and men have always been equal in the eyes of God, but now with humanity leaving that adolescent phase and entering maturity, now we can actually realize that reality, that women and men are equal. We can start realizing that in the world, and we need to realize that at this point. We need to have more of a balance. So women's issues and the progress of women was always important to me. Personally, I was always very competitive. I think a lot of it, I have an older brother, and I think a lot of that came from wanting to prove that I was just as capable as any other guy or boy or my brother. So I was driven academically, and I just wanted to always prove, that I could learn just as much as any other boy. I actually took chemistry AP, and I think I was the only girl in the class with like 5 of us. And I secretly loved that I was the only female.
You embraced it.
I embraced it, yeah. And with the basketball, which is the video you saw, I loved sports, I loved athletics, and I always wanted to beat the guy in the basketball game. And I think that helped me be driven, internally driven. My family never pushed that on me. Like, you have to be a doctor, you have to study. That was all internal.
I think you embracing that role is something that a lot of us can learn from, because you being the only woman in the class.
Right.
A lot of people would have looked at that as like, oh man, this is hard. This is not fair. You kind of just embraced it. Wherever I am, like, doesn't matter. Like, that just gave me a chip on my shoulder or a little bit more juice in my battery to make sure that I excel and let everybody else know that we can do this as well.
Right.
And one thing that you touched on earlier, I have a question. When the Bahai Faith looks at men and women equally, how exactly is that? Like, how is that taught? Because in my head, I'm thinking, like, I've always, when we have these conversations, I'm like, I separate fair from equal.
Okay.
But how is it taught in the Bahai faith?
So by equality, we don't mean sameness. Okay, we don't mean everyone's exactly the same or maybe has same roles, but that your worth and your opportunities and your opportunity to be able to develop to the fullest capacity that you have, which we all have we're all given different talents and capabilities, that the opportunities for that development have to be equal. So that doesn't mean men and women collectively are the same. But that we both men and women have to have equal participation, whether it's in the family or in the nation or globally, right? We have to have equal opportunities to participate and contribute. And our inherent value is equal.
I like that. I like
that. So
that.
it's not sameness. It doesn't mean that for me to be equal to men, as women to be equal, we have to be exactly the same. But that we should have the same opportunities. There cannot be oppression of a mass of people because of their gender, for example. Education opportunities, all these things are the Bible describes men and women as 2 wings of a bird. If you take a bird to represent all of humanity, and that bird has 2 wings, right? A left wing and a right wing.
Right.
And for that bird of humanity to fly to its highest heights, it needs both wings to be equally strong. That doesn't mean they're both doing the same exact thing, but they have the same strength and contribution to the flight of that bird.
I want to dig deeper here because that to me is a huge difference than I think how we see it in society. And I think it creates a lot of arguments, because unnecessary arguments, because obviously we're not the same.
Right.
You know, we're not the same. We do different things.
Right.
But what I love that you pointed out is the fact that it's equal in a sense of what you're bringing, your worth, in order for us to, like, I always look at it as a goal.
Yeah.
Like our family, we have family goals. You know, we have a family objective.
Yes.
In order for us to go as far as we need to go, as efficient as we need to get there, it needs equal effort and work from both parties.
Absolutely.
And that to me is the only way that things will work, and understanding that that may mean different roles. If I'm hearing you correctly, it may mean different roles, but you have to give 100% of your role. You have to give 100% of your role for us to work together in order to get a desired outcome.
Absolutely. You got it right on. And there can't be one person, like if you take a family as an example, you can't have one voice or one participation greater than the other. And the goal, you know, you have to go back to the idea, and I think that's, again, what drove me and made me not feel out of place in a class of just boys in chemistry, because I knew my internal nobility and worth. And that's huge. Like every human on this planet needs to be taught at a young age inherent nobility of every individual being. We all have internal nobility. Every person is different and unique. We all have unique talents and unique things to contribute to our families, to our society, and to the world. And our role as an individual, now talk about individualism, our role as an individual is to recognize our own gifts and our own capacity and work towards developing ourselves to our utmost capacity. Now, when it comes to a family, the family should also protect that. So each individual, the family, the marriage, for example, needs to provide a space, a safe space, where each individual can work towards their capacity. And each partner has to encourage that in the other partner, right? But at different times, that doesn't mean each be individuals and not work together. Because again, you're a partnership. So sometimes you have to give up some things. You have to sacrifice some things for that greater entity. But at the same time, the relationship needs to nourish and nurture the development of the partner. So you can't have one person bringing down the other person. That's why dominance doesn't work anymore. Maybe it worked in the past. It doesn't work anymore, because you both have to encourage the development of each other.
And I think that's something that I struggle with, you know, I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with, because especially, like, I know I'm the type, I tend to see things black and white. Right. You know, it's either this or it's that. And I realized, even through maybe the biggest example that I realized is with my eating. When I decided to not eat meat, fish, or eggs, I had to just become extreme, where it's just like, I'm just not eating it. Where the hardest thing is where I would like to be now, which is just balancing it. You know, like if I want to limit my meat a little bit, then I find the right balance. But for me, it's just like, no, I'm cutting it off, and that's that. And I think that I have that same approach in other areas of my life, because in a lot of ways, that's what's helped me get to a certain point. Like in football, it's just like you work hard, you do this, and you just follow it. It's not really encouraged to have like a balance, you know, but when you're working with somebody else, in a marriage or in a relationship, but of course a marriage, I'm assuming that component, that dynamic becomes even more important.
The flexibility.
Right. You know,
it's hard. As human beings, you know, we're not, we tend as human beings to think one or the other. We think dichotomously. But reality is that things are not dichotomous. They're on a spectrum, or there is flexibility. And sometimes you play one role, sometimes you play another role. Even in a marriage, you know, when there's two people, there's no majority, right? There's just two people. There's not three. So when you're consulting as a family, for example, as a married couple on an issue or coming up with a decision, sometimes you can't agree. Disagreement is reality, right? So one person has to defer to the other at different times. Sometimes maybe the wife will defer to the husband on a certain issue. And another time, the husband should defer to the wife. That is also part of it. You have to be flexible. You have to have a general guide and a general vision and goal, but then along that path, there has to be flexibility, compromise, So marriage isn't just two individuals doing their own thing in the same household. No. It's two people having that freedom to develop and grow as an individual, but then you're merging those two.
I like
for
that.
Something greater and bigger, but in that merging, at different times, you have to sacrifice certain things. Mm-hmm. You have to give up certain things, or you have to say, you know what, I'm going to defer to my husband on this. And the husband will say, I'm going to, at this point, defer to my wife on this issue or on this specific thing. And that's, scary. And that applies to everything, actually. Mm-hmm. Beyond the family, that applies to greater families. That same concept and those same principles make a town functional, and it makes a city functional and bigger, and that will lead to like a whole humanity being functional. Mm-hmm. That unity is really, really important. But to get to unity, sometimes people have to give up something.
And it's almost like, for whatever reason, sometimes I don't like the word humility, but there needs to be understanding that my way may not be the best way all the time.
Right.
Or like you said, yes, my partner may defer to me, or my wife or my girlfriend. Sometimes we'll talk about the word partner as well.
Sure.
But, my significant other may defer to me, and I may have to defer to her in some ways. So that's definitely something that I think when it comes to our relationships that we struggle in, and a big reason, I kind of try to always look at the root of the problem. And, we could sit here and say like, oh, well, not a lot of us grow up with, both, parents in the household, which obviously impacts it because you don't really see how two people interact. But also even, I grew up with my parents in the household, but we don't really have a lot of these. There's no courses that we learn on the most important thing, the most important decision that we're going to make, who we decide to spend our life with.
Yes.
But we'll take courses in math, courses in history, which get very specific. This is how you handle this. But for whatever reason, when it comes to relationships, it's kind of like just throw them in the water and they'll figure out how to swim.
Right.
And not everybody figures out how to swim. Yeah. So I think that that's something that your faith and your family did a tremendous job in, because, of course you want to see the example. You have to see the example, but it's also, if you can't see the example, even if you do see the example, to understand the playbook around it.
Yes.
And that to me sounds like what you received.
Right. I mean, in the Baha'i Faith, it describes marriage as a fortress for well-being. So I thought about that phrase. What's a fortress? A fortress is a safe area where there's war happening around. So you need that marriage to function. It's an institution, and it's an institution where when you're inside of it, there's security, there's love. It's a fortress against all the negatives you might face when you go out in the real world. And I think that's beautiful. Now, if that fortress, inside of it, there's abuse, there's neglect, there's dominance, that's not really a fortress for all the members. So the individual members of that family, all the individual's rights have to be upheld. But everyone has duties too, to each other and to the family. So I think that always shaped my idea of family and marriage, while being able to achieve my own personal goals, but then also contribute to the building of a family.
So you described it as a fortress.
Fortress for well-being.
Fortress for well-being. Yeah. And something that really stood out to me that you said is the fortress can't just protect one or two people in the fortress. If your family's in the fortress, then that means everybody's has to be respected in the same way and has to be viewed with a certain regard to where they feel safe in that fortress, because like you said, there's war and everything else in chaos going on outside of it. And that to me is, and you tell me, I don't have any kids, but as a parent, or hopefully as a future parent, that's what scares me the most, is the fact that once my kids leave the house, there's all that chaos of society. Right. I can teach them one thing in the household, but then if they go to school or if they're on a sports team and they're looking at all their friends' TikToks and and all these other things that are here that weren't here, when we were growing up, that to me, I'm scared of. Yeah. Because, so I guess my question to you would be, how do you make sure, or how do you do your best job to instill certain values in your kids to where even when they leave the fortress, they're still protected in sort of, I don't know, like a bubble around them to where they can bounce off the negative and still absorb the positive.
That is definitely a huge challenge I think we all face. So I think when your children are young, their education is extremely important. And when I say education, I don't just mean math and science. But when your children are young, under the age of like 10, 12 especially, the primary goal of that family, right, needs to be the education of their children, both materially, psychologically, spiritually. That spiritual education is huge. And that's where the family unit, again, helps nurture that. I'm not saying families who are maybe divorced or not don't have that, but ideally, that family unit will best provide that atmosphere for the children, because who are the primary educators of the children? Number one is the mother. And so when we talk about roles and equality and sameness, this is also what I'm talking about. In general, the mothers are the ones that carry the baby, and they're the ones that might nurse the infant, right? And nurture the baby at the beginning of life. And that primary educator of that child or that future generation is the mother. So she needs to be educated. And then the father's role, one of his main roles, is to help provide for that education by supporting the mother in providing that education. You know, so they're not exactly the same roles. Now, you can have a family where it's opposite, where the father might be more the primary nurturer, and that's fine. We have to allow for that flexibility again. I'm speaking in general terms, but for each individual people, they might have, for their family, something might work differently. And that's okay too. So that education of children, materially, emotionally, physically, you know, you got to make sure your kids are flossing and they don't get cavities and they're eating healthy. I got to make sure that their mental health is okay. I got to make sure they're educated in terms of sciences and arts. But you have to also make sure that they're getting spiritually educated. And what I mean by that is for the kid to understand that they're noble. That sense of inner nobility is a spiritual thing. Why are we all individually noble? Because God made us that way. He gave us all these capacities and abilities to be God-like.
What is nobility. That? Can you chime into that inner nobility? Because I want to further understand for me, but also for all the listeners, inner nobility. What can you explain that concept a little bit more? The
concept is, you know, in the Baha'i writings, there's a prayer, a hidden word is called, which says, "I have created thee noble. Why dost thou abase thyself?" Right? "I have created thee rich. Why dost thou bring thyself down to poverty?" And then later on in that quote, it says that God has instilled in us himself. He's in us. So that sense of nobility means we are blank slates, but we have the capacity. We're like a seed. Each of us is noble. We have the ability for greatness. We have the ability to manifest lots of virtues, which you can say are the godlike virtues. Patience, forgiveness, forbearance, you know, the ability to work hard, to seek justice and try to implement justice. These are all noble qualities that we can have. Truthfulness. So we have those abilities. So if we're acting in contrary to those, we're not fulfilling our true identities as human beings. And then you might see human beings that you might think are kind of acting lowly. But that's not what each of us has the capacity for. Wow. So that's the sense of nobility that I talk about. We're all given that. Or maybe that refers to, you know, in Christianity, it says God, we're made in the image of God. Right?
And that's something
not in the physical image, but in that spiritual capacity.
Right. No, please go.
Yeah. And so we have to nurture that. So we have to teach our children, you are noble. And I think that will counter a lot of what I hear my kids say, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not good. I don't know where they get these from. I think society is telling us we're not good enough. But if you teach kids, each of us has a capacity to be great. At the same time, you have to be humble. I know you don't like that word. And I think what that means is our greatness doesn't come from me. It comes from me in the sense that I have to work towards it, but it's a divine. So I need to constantly keep that in mind, that greater allegiance or that greater, you know, when you bow down, if that's to another person, it's to that divine. So you have to keep yourself humble and know that any gifts we're given, any greatness that might be mine, it's not really, really just mine. It really comes from the divine. And that keeps us, I think, from becoming egotistical and power hungry and thinking we're better than others. So it's a fine balance between knowing your nobility, but also knowing that of that nobility, what's the purpose of that nobility is to serve other people. So it's not to be self-serving, you know, and that kind of keeps us in check.
I like that a lot,
right?
Because even when I say that I don't like the word humility, humble, it's actually just more of a fear of it because I fear it, and for the same reasons that you just said.
Okay.
I fear that if I promote that or put that energy out, it'll almost put me in a mindset where I'm questioning, am I enough, rather than, you know what I mean? And I think that, and you just brought it out because I never looked at it that way, but it's more so I'm just more fearful of adopting that and it being applied in the wrong case. But you brought up examples that where it will teach you, and a lot of us sometimes get humbled just because we ignore that aspect of it, and we think it's just all us. You know, I'm just great just because I'm great, and we get humbled quickly, and we need to, and we need to understand that there is a divinity that you mentioned, and one thing that I wanted to circle back to that you mentioned is that God is in us. And I think that it's the inner nobility. Now that I understand the concept more, it's almost how I'm receiving it is it's letting you know that, hey, you have all this godly, all these godly qualities in you to accomplish whatever it is, your work, you know, like, so you have the godly qualities. And when you combine that with the work that you're willing to do, then that's when you can accomplish whatever it is you're looking to accomplish. And I think that a lot of us, and what my main issue was with Christianity when I was going through questioning a lot of things, is that I felt that it was taught to me from an oppressed standpoint where, where do most Black people, African Americans, whatever you call it, living in America, get their religion from? You get your religion from, you know, your oppressor.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when it was taught to us, it was taught in a different way than, you know, at the Black church, it was taught one way, but then at a white church, it was taught in a different way, more uplifting. But at the Black church, at least how, like, my research and how I received it, based on being in a church now, but also understanding the history of it, it was taught to keep you in a certain place that would make you a slave. More so, you know, they can put you in chains, but if they put your brain in chains and your mind, then you're far more valuable. You know, you'll believe that, oh, this earth is just supposed to be a sacrifice. I'm not supposed to be noble. You know, I'm not supposed to have inner nobility. I'm supposed to just, you know, live this, you know, obey my earthly master. And then once I die, I can have heaven. So that was my main, it was a big challenge for me to accept Christianity moving forward with how it was being taught. And of course, it's a book. You know, you can interpret a book however you want. But for me, the culture of Black Christianity was more so from an oppressed state than I saw other religions, and how the religions were working as a tool for them, serving the people. I felt that it wasn't serving us as much. And everything that you're saying with the Baha'i Faith, that's stuff that I get behind and stand on. Like, you have everything in you. And for whatever reason, kids, like you said, society, whatever it is, does not teach that. And to me, it's a very simple concept. Like, how can I say that I'm born in God's image, or that God is my creator, and me not have a little God in me? You know, like, that's from a simple standpoint as that. So sorry to ramble on.
No, that's you bring up really, really important points. And yes, religion has been used to suppress people, different groups of people. So I hear what you're saying. But, you know, in the Baha'i Faith, we're taught that every human being has two duties. One is to, as an individual, to develop our own mental, spiritual, emotional capacities. So it's this constant development. And then the second is to use those, whatever things we develop inside of ourselves, to contribute to the betterment of our society. And it's a constant back and forth, right? So you're contributing to your society, you're growing as an individual, back and forth. So I think one of the things we teach our children is the aim of getting an education, growing, developing, is not so that then you get to live, you can make money, and you get to be great, people say good things about you. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to use those skills that you've now developed to be of service to your community, to your family, to the world, really. And that, again, humbles. It gives you a greatness, but then the purpose of the greatness is not for your own self-serving purpose.
It sounds like a system of checks and balances almost.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, where it's like, okay, you made it successfully individually. Hold on, we got to check, balance it out, make sure that you're also providing value to the community.
Exactly.
And also, it has to be, you can't just be giving yourself away to the community without making sure that you're growing as an individual as well. So I like that balancing aspect.
And same thing in a family. You can narrow down anything into just the immediate family. Because again, don't forget, families are building blocks of all of society. So we do need strong, healthy, united families to have a united community. I think we tend to think as human beings like things are separate. There's society and then there's me. And if I don't like the way society looks, it's society's fault and I'm separate or my family's separate. But the reality is, as individuals and as families, we affect society and it's back and forth. So if we want to change in our society, we have to start with myself and my family, and then that will grow and develop. The same way that when I develop my own qualities, it's going to serve others. That's the goal. As a family, you're going to develop a strong, unified, growing family that family unit can also serve as a unifying force in the community, which is beautiful.
Right. And I think that's a huge point where, you know, it's the long game. It's big picture.
Big picture.
You know, it's starting with ourselves and our family and then promoting that energy outward. Absolutely. Where a lot of frustration may come when you just want, this is how I know it should work. I want to tell everybody and everybody should just listen because I have the answer. Right. Rather than you have to have, you know, proof in the pudding. Like you have to be living it first and then encourage others to be doing the same. So that's how I took it away. That was my takeaway from that. And I wanted to ask you, one of the things that I see when I put up certain posts, a lot of pushback on are roles. Okay. And you've touched on and elaborated on how roles are important and how there needs to be flexibility. Right. I think that our women in society embrace the role of being the professional woman now in the modern society. And I think on the other side, a lot of our men don't embrace a protector, provider role, where to me, it's like the balance has been thrown off. Like, even though, like you said, different people can play different roles, but for me, or my question is like, how do we get to a point where we can embrace the non-professional? I don't want to say that's the masculine side and then the feminine is being a mom at home, but how do we get people to understand that a mom is the dopest role? Like, you know, a CEO, like an owner, like a mom is the CEO of the house. You know what I mean? So of your home, like, so how do you get women and men both to embrace and understand that roles do serve a very valuable purpose? Yeah. Because I feel like people are scared of just using that word. Right.
Because you don't want to. I think people don't want to put people in a box and say that if this is your main role or this is your role, that's it, and you don't have the freedom to be more than that or to be other things, right? Right. But yeah, being a mother is a dopest role. I agree. Mm-hmm. I think modern society is very materialistic, and it's about success is defined as material success and professional success only, and that's not right. That's a materialistic viewpoint. So mothering or being a mother, a stay-at-home mother, or focusing at a given time on raising of children is not seen as a noble thing. It's not seen by society in general, modern society, as a high status. But it really should be. Mm-hmm. And that does require us to change our viewpoints of that. Mothering is amazing, and it's super hard. You know, you have to be a psychologist, you have to be a nurse, you have to be a teacher, you have to be patient. And I think that role is incredible. That doesn't mean that women only have to be that, right? But mothers, we do have as women, as feminine qualities, we have these qualities put in us that do make us good caregivers. Mm-hmm. You know, we have compassion, we have patience, although sometimes you might lose your cool. We have the ability to forgive. We have unconditional love. We have the ability to like sacrifice for others. But if you only do that, sometimes that can be detrimental to women. And doesn't mean men can't have that role too. Fathers have to have those qualities as well. So I think the masculine and the feminine, the ideal is women, we have these feminine qualities that we should nurture, not be afraid to show. But we should also develop a little bit more of the traditionally masculine qualities of assertiveness, strength. These things are good too for women to have. And for men, the masculine qualities are amazing and needed. And those are good things. You know, strength, the desire to progress, the desire to achieve. But men can also develop some of the more traditional feminine qualities while maintaining their masculinity. That makes you more whole, that makes you able to contribute, I think, to society in a better way. You know, it's okay to be compassionate, to feel, to allow yourself to feel. These are things that are not truly masculine. It's what society is trying to put men in a box too. And I think we need to get out of the box. You know, so I think that's why people have pushed back about the idea of roles. Like I'm a mother. I am the CEO in some ways of our house, but so is my husband. But I also am a professional, and I also don't know that, you know, my husband doesn't. Our roles in the house are not that I have to be the one that cleans and cooks. I'm not told I have to do this because I'm a woman. Right? You have to allow for people to fit into their roles as they want to, and as a family decides as a unit.
That makes a lot of sense.
You don't want to feel confined. And no one wants to feel like they're being told what to do because of XYZ.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And you, as you're speaking, and I'm absorbing the information, in a lot of ways you're throwing me off. Like, hold on, I gotta take notes to check that. Yeah. You know, rethink a lot of things, because when it comes to the roles, I guess the challenge that I have the most, or maybe where men may be neglecting the most, because I tend to put a lot of responsibility on men, and I've changed my thoughts with a lot of that. Like I used to, you know, if I'm going back and forth with my homegirls and stuff, like, listen, you need to do this, and it made me realize that I do see men as leaders, in the family, and I think that us not showing enough appreciation for the role of being a mother, us not going back to what you mentioned, us not feeling, us not allowing our wives to feel that, hey, this role that you're fulfilling as a mother is extremely important. Like it's the most important role. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think if women felt that appreciation more, then maybe they would see that role with the same level of prestige as being a professional. You know, because let's just be honest, when, you know, you put up a post on any social media network, if you put like your professional achievements, you know, people will clap, people will celebrate it. But if you just put, you know, and you just put, you know, something about being a mom, you're not going to get as much, you know, it's kind of like, okay, like, okay, you're being a mom. It's not, we don't clap for it and appreciate it. Right. So I don't think women feel as whole as they do when it comes to the professional side, which they have to compete for, you know, have to earn, and you get a certain level of return that I don't think they're receiving from us when it comes to fulfilling the role as being a mom. Is that how?
Yeah. I think the future, you know, again, going back to the concept of humanity progressing, I think the things are evolving and growing, and the traditional roles I don't think fit anymore necessarily, in terms of the husband's only role is to go out and provide the money, to have a house and all these things, and materially provide, and that's where it ends. And the mother's role is to raise the children, make sure there's food in the house, keep the house clean, is the only role. I think those the more mature, advanced way that looks is deeper than that. And so you have to look at family as not just providing for each other materially. There's a spiritual element, and an element of, okay, now as a family, what are we going to do in the world? How are we going to serve the world? So as women, you know, in the past, we were not seen as equals in society in terms of equal voice, equal participation, and decision making and influence. And now we have that, and that is important to have, even within a family. So the woman's role should encompass mothering and raising of children, but that requires support from the father to be able to do that in a healthy, cohesive way. Right? You could be a single mother, and there are many amazing single mothers, but ideally you have that other support, right, from the father. But the mother has more to give to the family unit than only being a mother directly. She has opinions to give about decisions made in the family, about what are the goals of the family, how are they going to contribute, how are they going to serve the community. You know, she's got a lot of things to contribute in that way. And the father has a lot to contribute to parenting as well, to being, consulting with the children as they get older, talking about various issues, guiding them. So those roles are really getting blurred more. But the basic roles are the children's role is really to obey the parents, right?
We can agree on that.
That doesn't mean, though, that they don't have individual rights and that their voices shouldn't be heard. That doesn't mean that if they don't agree, they can't voice that agree. But it has to be done in a loving, consultative manner. Knowing that, yeah, my parents are going to listen to me. It doesn't mean that I'm going to tell them what to do as a child, but that we can have a consultation. And maybe the decision made as a family will change based on the kid's contribution. And then the parents' role, the mother and the father's role is to provide for those children, to educate them, to provide for them, to create a nest where the individual kids can thrive and develop to their capacities. And the same for the parents. You know, you can't have one dominating. You mentioned that you see the father and the husband as the leader in the family. I'm not sure I fully agree with that. I think they both the parents are leaders. What do you mean by leader? Do you mean
so I see
the ultimate decision maker? You know,
if things all go bad, the man takes the responsibility of it. If we're a family, just like if it's a business or if it's a ship, you know, the captain goes down with the ship. I see it as, if I'm the man in this family, I'm assuming all responsibility if things completely go bad.
Okay.
So I see it as more of a responsibility, not in a sense of the responsibility that just comes with making every decision, but a responsibility that comes with, I'm the one that at the end of the day is going to receive the blame. And I accept that. I accept that as the leader, that when we win, it's like a team. When we win, everybody gets the credit. But when we lose, I'll be the one standing up taking that. And I think that just teams that I've been on, like I relate a lot of stuff to sports. The teams that I've been on, the person that's out there that accepts that responsibility, that becomes that natural leader that we're all looking to. It's not anything that the coaches may have appointed, but I just know that guy studies more than everybody. First one, you know, in the gym, the last one to leave. That person, I'll take a humble role and follow that person. And not to say that I see that person as better than me, but I'm just like, they've earned that. And I know that when we lose or if we're in a tough position, that we can count on that person. So that's kind of how I see it. I totally understand how seeing it both ways. And that kind of led me, I want you to respond there, but then I'll kind of touch on where that led me to.
You know, I think I don't fully agree with that. I think that maybe in the past that was more applicable and it worked because men were more educated, they were more able to fulfill their capacities than women. They had more opportunity, right, to develop their capacity more than women have traditionally. But in this day and age, we're not seeing it quite yet globally, but women now have to have the opportunity, and we are getting more of the opportunity to develop our own capacities. So I think it'll change in families because now both have the skills and the capacity, right, to guide the family. because, it's again that wing.
Mm-hmm.
We are not made to be, whereas human beings were created to rely on each other. Mm-hmm. You can be on your own, but in the end, you still need guidance from other people, and you need to rely on other people at other times. And I think that's the beauty of a marriage, that you both serve that role for each other in terms of guiding each other, helping each other develop your capacities, developing spiritually, strengthening each other as individuals. But in the end, you both have to give up. I think both equally have to give up things to come together and be a unit. It's like, imagine two rivers merging into one. Mm-hmm. You can't have within that merge one river, one line of that river more dominant. I don't think that works anymore. And I think the capacity for that family to flourish and grow and become more of a positive force in society is greater when both the husband and wife contribute. We haven't quite seen that yet necessarily. So I think it's foreign. It's a foreign thing.
Right.
But if you embrace that, I think it's kind of like the, individually we're great, but us together we're stronger, that you were taught as a kid. And I think in a family it's, that doesn't mean that different people don't have different responsibilities within that family. Like, you can't both do the exact same thing, right? The whole point of being together is that I'm not enough as one individual. I'm not going to be complete as one. So I'm going to merge with another person, and we each have our own things that we bring. But how much each contributes can't be lopsided. One can't be lopsided, because then you get that lopsided bird.
So this is that's
what I'm gonna
So let me
all
right. So back to what you said as far as with the iPhones, like different religions were meant to serve different times.
Right.
An iPhone 1 can't necessarily solve the problems that an iPhone 14 can, but at the time it solved more than maybe the current phone.
Sure. Yeah.
I see that as when I look at men being the leaders of the family, especially for different groups. Like the groups that I look at, obviously, when it comes to Black relationships, we are at the bottom. We don't marry as much. Our kids grow up in broken households the most. We don't have that. And because our men have been emasculated so much,
by society,
I think that outside of the Black community, it may be the suitable medicine to say, like, hey, maybe both can, be the leaders.
Yeah.
But because Black men have been taken out of the household so much when it comes to Black relationships, I think that a different medicine may be needed. Like this, I see it. Like a lot of the other cultures that I see who have been successful, they have a traditional conservative lifestyle where the male is the leader. And I think for them, the balance is, okay, the man is the leader. Okay, let's balance it out a little bit. They can afford to balance it out by let's adding a little bit for the woman to give a little bit more power, a little more leadership. But when you use that same formula, when it comes to Black relationships, if you give a little bit more to the woman, the Black man's already emasculated. The Black woman, she's already the head of the household, the head of everything, running everything. But alone. And when you look at like the policies that incentivize a woman to, okay, you don't need a man, we'll take care of you. Like if you're single, we'll pay for that apartment that you live in. If you're divorced, the government comes in and they be the man. So for me, that's why it's so fearful to say like giving a balance, because if it's already lopsided, like if there's two cups that are sitting there and the woman cup is filled 70% and the guy cup is filled 30%, if you give them both the same, let's say you're going to give them both a couple teaspoons, that range is still there. That separation is still there, even though you did equal for both. So I think that's what makes me push back or just not have as much faith in a quote unquote balanced approach, because we are already so off balance compared to a lot of other more conservative cultures, because we're probably the only ones that at this degree are so balanced in the opposite way as everybody else. Like most other cultures, the man has most of the leadership. In our culture, it's the complete opposite. So that's, I guess, why,
Well, these are, now you're pointing out ills of society that is radically preventing the progress of all of us, that needs to be remedied. And if you go back to that sense of inner nobility, if that is taught and embraced and internalized in the Black man in America, don't you think that would be so revolutionary in terms of, because you're right, society's constantly saying, Black man, you're at the bottom. You're nothing. You're not noble. What does it teach? You're not noble. You're not capable. You're less than. You're inferior. And this is a myth that is destroying this country and destroying our humanity. So this is something that definitely has to be remedied. So I can see what you're saying, that because if you're starting off there in a family, it becomes difficult to have that healthy relationship. But it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right. Yeah, that would be ideal.
And there needs to be upliftment. Equality doesn't mean that men have to be lower. The husband has to be lower than the woman. And this idea that women can do it all on their own, or it can just be alone and be everything by themselves, that's not correct either. That's also lopsided. It's not, that unit is not going to be as productive, as the
agreed.
Being lopsided. But I wouldn't shy away from the concept of a strong woman with a strong man. That's totally possible. But we have to lift up. We have to lift up the Black men in this country.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Black men are. I feel like I don't like playing victim. Like, I don't do that. Like, I think the only solution for Black people fixing Black people's problems are Black people fixing Black people's problems. Nobody else can solve our issues but us. And when we decide and embrace the fact that nobody else can do it, then I think we can assume that responsibility to fulfill that. Until then, we're just always asking this to be fair. Can you change this? Can you change that? Rather than just putting it on ourselves. So, you mentioned the Black man when it comes to not being taught the inner nobility. Yeah. That is huge. And I remember a rapper coming out saying that if he calls himself devil or little or, these different words that we use, people will just accept it. Like, okay, cool. Put out some devil stuff. All right, cool. You're a little devil. Like, you're a demon. Like, we brag about being demons, like on demon time. But if I went on Instagram right now and just said, I'm a god, people would like, who's this arrogant person to think that he... So you're fine me calling myself the devil and calling myself a demon, but you have an issue with me uplifting myself. Why wouldn't I call myself... If I'm in a basketball game, I'm going into it like I'm the best player ever. I'm better than Michael Jordan. Yeah, am I? No, but if I really believe that, then I'm going to be better than I would have been if I didn't believe I was Michael Jordan. Like, why would I not aim for the highest, the most? Why would I not aim for God, my idol? You know what I mean? I want to be like, that's who I'm aiming for, not for another human. Like, I'm aiming to be in this godly image, not another human image. So I really appreciate you bringing that up because it's something that needs to be taught to kids. If you teach them to kids, I mean, imagine a kid. The one thing I guess I am happy about with Barack, not to take any shots, but the biggest thing, I shouldn't say that. The biggest thing was that growing up, I probably didn't notice it in real time, but if a Black kid said like, yeah, I'm going to be the president, I don't know how teachers wouldn't have just laughed. You know what I mean? They probably did laugh in his house. But then when he did it, I was like, oh wow, it's possible. Right. So things like that, I guess it goes to your point, seeing examples. My fear is because I've never seen a successful example in the Black community where, the women are, assuming maybe a similar leadership role than the man. Right. So therefore, my approach is to just look around and see what do I see that has worked? And I just want to do that. Yeah. So it's it's again, I think we have to look forward and see where are we headed, and we're at a critical juncture in the world right now where a lot of these older ways of thinking are kind of dissolving, and we have to nourish a newer way that's built on these foundations, and of more equality and
the capacities of each individual person. That inner nobility, again, I don't want to repeat the same thing, but I think that's huge. So I think for me personally, as a female, right, I came from a culture from Iran that in some ways taught that women were second to men. I mean, you see that today on the news with the uprising of women against the government who's trying to suppress them. So I came from that culture, but within my family culture, we had this minority religious perspective, which was that no, women and men are equal. So I knew as a female, I had this inner nobility that was no less than a given man. Mm-hmm. Even though society would tell you opposite, but I was armed with that armor. And that's why I think I was able to overcome it in the sense of, I knew, the spiritual reality is that I am innerly noble and just as good as any given man, right? My worth is not any less. Even though society was telling me opposite, that allowed me to succeed and strive and not doubt myself. Not to say that I didn't have doubts at times. Mm-hmm. Of course I did. Mm-hmm. We're human, you start to second guess because you sometimes believe in what society is telling you. So I would imagine, I'm not a black man, but I would imagine it's similar, right, against racism. So if you're taught as a black man, your true inner nobility, that what society is telling you is wrong, it's there to uphold a system that's unequal and a supremacy system. If you know that at a young age and you're growing and you're constantly reminding yourself, no, I am noble, I'm fully capable, what society tells me is just wrong, I think that arms you and it gives you that self-confidence as an individual human being, right?
I agree. It's like even as you're talking, mm-hmm. I'm processing it, mm-hmm. not even thinking about what I'm going to ask you. Maybe I should, you know what I mean? But I'm really just having a conversation, which I think is good because I have to process what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And reflect on it because we all need to be open mm-hmm. to new solutions. You're married. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you have a successful marriage. Yeah. So I'd be a fool to not listen to what you're saying sure. and to, see how that can be implemented in my life. Like obviously maybe different cultures, right. maybe, different solutions slightly, mm-hmm. but I think a lot of us could benefit from seeing a lot of other successful relationships and, take away what you can. Take away yes. what you think is going to benefit. Maybe, okay, like not really sure about that, but I think it adds a tremendous value for people to just be exposed to see how a successful marriage operates.
Right. I mean, in our marriage, we were married 17 and a half years. There's never been one person dominating the other in our marriage. We're both doctors. We met in medical school. I think one key to keeping that family unity is consultation. So loving consultation. Consultation is the idea that two people or three or four, but in a marriage it's two, come together on any given issue or topic. They discuss freely, but from a position of humility, not like I'm coming in, I know the answer and I'm going to convince the other person of my answer. Not that mentality, but a humble coming together, loving. It's got to be loving, humble, can't be angry. And you discuss an issue knowing that I'm going to give my opinion and the other person is going to give theirs. And in the end, usually there'll be an answer that is not either person's answer. Right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be a new, almost like you're constantly creating a child. Right.
It's a merger of the two.
It's a merger. It's the idea is going to be a brand new being, entity, mm-hmm. living thing that comes from the two people's perspectives and their own opinions and ideas. But you can't enter that thinking, I have the answer and I'm going to, my job here is to convince the other person of what I want. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes it's two people. Sometimes you're not going to get that. So sometimes one will defer to the other on the issue. And you have to do that for the greater unity and the greater good of the entity. So you have to have some humility, say, you know what, on this issue, we're never going to really agree. But in this moment, I'm going to defer to my spouse at a given time. The spouse will defer to you. But most of the time, you're going to come up with a solution that is a combination of both of your ideas. Mm-hmm. It's like creating a child in a way. Mm-hmm. That child is a mixture of the two, mm-hmm. but it's its own unique thing.
I think
so that consultation is, I think, what's going to lead the future of humanity. No longer like a dominant thing. I don't think that's going to, it worked in the past because of the conditions that human beings were in. Maybe in the past, the man had to be the sole leader because the woman didn't have that opportunity in life to develop as equally. But we're not there anymore for the most part. I mean, there's still places in the world that it's like that.
Right.
And we have to get everyone. So I think that consultative recipe is going to be what's going to bring us into the future.
I think,
you know,
so as you're talking, the epiphany for me was maybe it's because things haven't worked maybe within my community. I just tend to gravitate towards what I know will work.
Right. What you've seen.
What I see will work. Yeah. Not necessarily, well, what's the best thing? You know, I'm just looking at like, well, this works. Look, we've been losing games and we're just going to do what that team did to at least go 500.
Right.
You know, to win 70% of your games rather than me thinking about it like,
but not other cultures don't necessarily have it right either. I think this is at different levels, it's a struggle for everybody in the world because again, we're coming upon a new horizon, and in every single way. Again, we're leaving that adolescence, and humanity is entering maturity. We have so many things to change in our world, and this is one of it. And that's why I think families are having a crisis. There's so many single people now. There are so many broken families, and that's why we see a broken world. Because again, the family is the bedrock. So we have to be able to come back to, okay, how do we have, in a progressive fashion, how do we have that family unit? Because it is extremely important. If we don't have whole families, we're not going to have a whole world. You know, but we have to figure out what are the principles we need, and you can't take spirituality out of it. So one other concept I think, and you could be, you know, you could not be religious and still have this idea, is that there's got to be a greater divine that each individual looks to as their guiding. I don't think you can look at the husband or the wife as a guiding person. I think that works anymore. Because as an individual human being, you can't be someone's guide. I mean, you can consult with each other and encourage each other, right? But no one person can be like the teacher, I don't think. You know, that teacher, that greater guide has to be the divine. And you both are looking to that.
I think one thing, and then we'll take a little break, but I want to get your opinion on this, and maybe we can elaborate it on after we come back from break. But this is the second time that you mentioned it, and I said, you know what, I have to address it. Family. Man, woman, or I'm not even going to get into a husband, wife. Yep. That's what I'm focusing on.
Right. Yeah.
So with a husband and a wife, I think when I put out this message and say we need more families, we need kids growing up with both parents, I get a lot of pushback from, of course, parents who are single, and they'll always say, well, you know, is it better to raise my kid in a toxic situation because I couldn't get along with my husband or my wife, or is it better for, you know, us to just go our separate ways and, you know, to live in different households? And I always look at that as extremely selfish because it just comes across, in my opinion, that the people that are saying that, you're not even thinking about your kids.
Right.
Because if more emphasis was put on your kids, then maybe you would work that situation out.
Right.
Maybe you would compromise in certain ways to where you'd have a certain level of flexibility to understand, because I think people tend to ignore statistics when it doesn't align with their convenience. And it may be more convenient for you as a parent to go your separate way and not have to have the work, the work that it takes to be in a marriage. I think that they operate more out of convenience rather than understanding that statistics show that your kids are just going to be in a better position in life if they grow up with both parents.
Absolutely.
And that's something that, for whatever reason, we haven't been able to get through to and I say the Black community, but then as I think about it, because you mentioned it, it's becoming like across the board with a lot of other communities where people are just divorcing, like, we don't really like the same ice cream. Let's divorce. It's like no, it's supposed to be hard.
Yes.
Like you're not supposed to. The goal is like I more so look at the goal as the purpose of the family and not just, I'm not happy today. It just, the purpose should make you happy. But to me, I don't want to move around based on my personal happiness if I'm a parent, especially once I have a child that I'm bringing into the world.
100%. So this really goes back to, if you have situations of abuse, major abuse, neglect, those things, I think we can all agree that that's no longer a fortress of well-being, right? So that's a different story. But it goes back to the beginning of, okay, when you're choosing, people I don't think really think about when they choose a partner. You have to really contemplate and think about who you want to choose as your life partner, right? So to have a successful marriage, you have to start off when you're deciding who to marry or to go into partnership with. That takes self-knowledge, knowing yourself. For example, if you're a creative human being, right, you might really need a spouse who's also creative, or what's going to help you as an individual to grow and reach your capacity is someone who's very encouraging, for example, or someone who's very calm and can bring peace because you might be kind of in turmoil. And the same thing, like, what am I bringing? What qualities am I bringing to this union that I think will help this union survive? So you have to really think about the qualities of the person that you want to enter a marriage with. And in the Baha'i Faith, the marriage is not really seen as a union in this life, in this material life. The ideal marriage in the Baha'i Faith is described as you're picking a partner that's going to be your soulmate, your partner through the journey of your soul for eternity.
Wow.
Not just this life, which is kind of, I always think of that. Like, wow, he's my partner for all the next phase after we die, our spiritual journey going forward. He's my partner. So you gotta know that that's what you're creating. So you gotta know yourself. You gotta know, like, what are the basic qualities that what things annoy you? Right. Just the little things, but it's got to be deeper than just how are we going to create this material life. You got to think deeper at a deeper level. But yes, once you decide to come together, you really shouldn't just separate for the little things.
And maybe we need to go.
You're right. You have a family that you have to go into it knowing that this is an institution that in my life is my priority. Like, I'm upholding that institution, making sure it's unified, making sure that it works and it's healthy for every member is my primary goal. Everything else is secondary. Everything else, your career, everything else has to be secondary to do it. Not to say that you only devote your time to your family and you neglect other relationships. No, but that is the primary. Once you enter that union, that's got to be a primary.
And as you're talking, we can't emphasize that enough. The choosing. The choosing is important. If you go into it with the mentality of, this isn't just who I'm creating a kid with and I can get divorced if it doesn't work. This isn't just somebody I'm going to be with even for the rest of my life on earth until I transition. Right. This is somebody who's going to be with me for my soul lifespan, not just my earthly lifespan. Right. And if we go into it like that, it's almost as if, I hate to relate this to like hiring on the job, but when you have a bad employee, a lot of times you saw that from the beginning. You didn't do your due diligence when you were hiring that person.
Exactly.
Because you knew that they didn't qualify for that particular role that you were looking for. Right. And I think we need to do more due diligence when it comes to who we're choosing as a partner, with the understanding of, even though it's easy to go to an attorney and get a divorce, that's not happening. No. That's not what we're building here. And
it's like hiring an employee knowing that you can never fire. Right. You can fire them, but thinking, I'm never going to fire this person. This is it. They're my employee forever. You're going to think of it. You got to think of it more with a weighty thing. Another thing in the Baha'i Faith, by the way, speaking of family as a unit of the community, is that, so in the Baha'i Faith, the couple has to choose. You have to choose for yourself your life partner, but you do also need parental consent. I think parents should be playing more of a role in
choosing and helping choose who, I guess I'm looking at it from a male perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes to our young women, we're just all over the place. You know, it's almost encouraged, go to college, have fun, you know, just enjoy yourself. Where in actuality, like, that's prime time to figure out who you're going to be with, you know? Right. So for me, I don't understand how people don't have their parents who have been there before, who know better than us. We're 16, 20, 25, 30, you know, even at that age, you still don't know life in a lot of ways.
There's no way.
I'm a big, so I think with that, I'll be choosing, you know, my future kids' significant others. With them. So
I'm not saying, so all the traditions, a lot of traditions have chosen for the kids. So we don't, you have to choose, you know, the Baha'i idea is that each person chooses for themselves. But in that, we have so much guidance on choosing a life partner. You have to become thoroughly acquainted with the character of the other person. And you have to put yourself as a couple in different situations. Not just, that's why like The Bachelor doesn't work. They're like in these amazing resorts having great dinners. Of course they're going to fall in love. Like that's not reality. You have to put yourself in situations, do a service project together, visit each other's families, see how they interact with each other. They interact with their family. You know, go on a little trip together. Put yourself in various situations and see how are your temperaments kind of similar? Do you make similar choices and decisions? Can you work together on a project? Do you have that ability to work together? Because that's what marriage is. It's a think of it as like writing a story, or what characters you want in that story, or you're making a project. So you got to think of it that way. You have to become thoroughly acquainted, but you have to know yourself. What things don't matter to me, but what things are maybe my top 3 things that I need in a life partner. And it can't just be about what you need, also what can you provide. Do I think I have the qualities that I think my partner needs in their life? Because they ought to be happy too. Or they have to be fulfilled and have someone that they can grow together with, right? So becoming thoroughly acquainted, once you find someone that you're thoroughly acquainted with their character and you think this is someone I want to marry as a life partner, eternal partner, now you go to your families and you have to have their consent. And the reason for that is because we don't live in little bubbles, isolated bubbles. We are a family as a microcosm of the world and the building blocks of humanity. So if we want a unified humanity, it starts with a unified family. Then outside of the immediate family is the families that are being joined now by this marriage. So you want to foster that. You want your marriage to serve as a unifier of other families, right? How like can you imagine how that would look if your family can serve as bringing now the 2 families together? So that parental consent, you know, can allow for that.
Yeah, and go ahead.
You know, in olden days, what was it? It was like daughters were married off to bring villages and kingdoms together, warring tribes together, right? That was a more superficial format, but now take that on a deeper level spiritually. Now imagine these unity of these families, but the couple decides, the families are not forcing it. The couple decides, but then when the families agree to it, they're entering with the support of their families. That marriage is much less likely to fail.
Right. Yeah, a parent can't just, all right, that's who you're going with.
No.
And for me, it's almost done to get the same results, but not with the same technique.
Yes.
And I see it as first how you raise your kids, then the guidance, which is obviously huge. The guidance, that's the parental consent that I see. And it's also the situations that you put your kids in. So it's the guidance, but then also putting your kids in certain environments to where they're going to be around others, people that would
be good for them,
qualify more so to
you can
be
have that dinner party, you know,
you know what I mean? You got like, okay, I got if I had a daughter, then I would just make sure, you know, that I have her in certain environments where I think that there's righteous young men, and then it's almost as if I can give you guidance on these 3 guys, you know, but in her mind, you know, I'm cool with her picking whichever one, but because I already did my due diligence in raising her, guiding her, and then putting her in an environment that I feel comfortable and I think is best for her to choose with her partner, who's gonna kind of be that perfect match for her, or like, even if it's not perfect, who's gonna be the match that she's willing and he's willing to just go through whatever to build the family and to grow in a certain way. So
right. Like we have 2 kids, you know, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and my 12-year-old is the boy, and I already know which few qualities he will need in his mate because of the way his personality is.
Wow.
Like you gotta look at the love language of the person, right? So you really should study psychology before you get married. You know, there's so many things about relationships that psychology is huge. If one person's love language is one thing and the other one's is completely different, they might have trouble making each other feel loved, feel seen, feel heard. But these are also things you can learn. You know, these are things.
So there's hope.
Skills you can learn. There is hope. There are definitely.
Yeah.
For example, you know, if like nagging isn't good, no one likes nagging. So you want to avoid nagging in a marriage. But you have to also listen. Like if say I'm always complaining to my husband, you're not helping with the dishes, and I just get angry and say, you never help me with the dishes. It's probably not about the dishes. It might be that I don't feel like he's contributing enough to the family, like I'm contributing. Or I might feel like he's not looking at serving my needs. It's deeper than the dishes. So those are things where the immature thing might be for me to just nag him about dishes. The more mature thing is to sit down and have a conversation and say, listen, I don't feel that you're really seeing me or you're hearing me. And then he needs to be open to say, okay, look at my own actions. What am I doing in that relationship to do that? And we shouldn't undermine therapists. They can be a good guide. There's just so many, or your families can be good people to consult.
I agree. Especially
but it's more than for the marriage. Marriages are more successful when they have the proper support of their families.
So with that, it's deeper than the dishes.
Deeper than the dishes. Yeah.
We're going to take a little break. Probably went longer than we anticipated, but we'll take a little break and then we'll come back and just very, very blown away by you being here and appreciative. So
I love this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We here. Big fish shit. Ooh, ooh.
Welcome to the podcast. Hope y'all enjoy it. Hope y'all learn something. And most importantly, we hope y'all elevate. Let's get it.
Big fish, hit a big lick. We gon' bet it right back and hit a big flip. We been up for a minute and we still lit. Yeah, them cats gon' talk, but we don't feel shit. We just giving y'all gems y'all can live with. Elevate your mind, never mind all the bullshit. Finna talk about stocks, we ain't worry about ops. First get the bread up, then buy back the whole block. 10 toes down, we ain't never gonna stop. I'm a man of my word, I ain't never gonna flop. If I said it, then I meant it. Real ones gon' respect it, and it's still OG. It's in me, I represent it.